Alright friends, what's up? Stobbie here. And as discussed at the end of the last season, season 18 of our Battle Brothers playthrough, which didn't go so well. I did say that I wanted to do a brief little video where we go over what we can expect in the upcoming DLC. For those of you watching this in the future, I just want to point out that this is being recorded, 19th of October, so none of the DLCs have actually released yet, so this will be speculative at best. What I'm going to do is I'll read through each of the updates and then do a bit of theory crafting on how I think it will impact the game and what we can expect. Once the DLCs have been released, we'll obviously play test it a little bit, and then I might update these videos or make updated ones with some recommendations of how to handle all the various enemies and tactics and whatnot. Right, let's get into it. So, Devblog 99, and the first of the enemies being added is the Hexe. There we go. The upcoming Beasts and Exploration DLC will add a variety of new beasts and related creatures to the world of Battle Brothers. We're going to introduce new opponents to cover the early, mid and late game. Some of them will be pretty complex to fight, and others more straightforward. Some will be magical creatures and some plain beasts, but all of them will come with their own unique mechanics to challenge you. Start things off, we'll be taking a look at the Hexe today. It's the first of two upcoming spellcaster type opponents we're adding, and intended for spicing up the mid to late game. Let's roll. First thing is mid to late game, that's the first thing I'm noting here, so that's a relief. Okay, so the Hexe is a witch inspired by Grimm's fairy tales, a malevolent old crone living in swamps and forests outside of villages alone or in a coven with other hexen. They are human, but have long sacrificed their humanity for otherworldly powers. They are feared, but also worshipped by some. They're burned at the stake, and yet people seek them out to plead for miracles. They lure and abduct little children to make broth and concoctions out of. They strike terrible pacts with villagers to receive their firstborn. They weave curses and cast hexes. Their huts may or may not be made of candy. With her sorcery, a Hexe can enthrall wild beasts and even warp the mind of humans, and so will often be found in the company of creatures that serve her. The Hexe has two skills in combat. The first one is called Charm and works like this. From her shriveled lips, the crone blows one of your men a seductive kiss to bewitch their mind. A strong-willed individual can resist with a successful resolve check, but otherwise they're doomed to have their senses warped and to fall under the spell's dominion for several turns until the effect wears off. To the ensorcelled, the Hexe no longer appears as an old crone, but a youthful lady with radiant beauty for which they will gladly obey every command. They'll be eager to shield the witch from arrows with their bodies and not think twice about hacking their comrades to pieces in order to protect their beloved. Should every last man on the battlefield be mind-controlled by a Hexe, the Coven will have them all commit suicide in order to end the battle. Even though the Hexe is old and fragile, has no melee attack, and in fact no zone of control, she isn't quite defenseless. Her second skill is also a spell. It's called Hexe and can be cast on one enemy at a time. Anyone that has a Hexe cast on them is cursed to feel the same pain and receive the same wounds as the Hexe does. It's mutually assured destruction when the Hexe defends herself by giving you a choice. Attack her and risk the health and potentially even life of one of your men, or let the hag live for another round, hoping that she doesn't do too much damage in the meantime and that you can get to her before she casts another Hexe. Or at least cast it on someone who can take a blow for the team. Fighting a Hexe is different from fighting most other opponents in the game. For starters, the stronger you are, the stronger the Hexe gets, as you'll spend a good time dealing with your own men turned hostile. Her two skills also make for a more puzzle-esque battle than usual, but the right approach can turn a seemingly impossible challenge into a manageable one. Maces and nets are useful for disabling your own men while they're charmed. Rushing or taunting the Hexe can be effective, and having solid resolve is always helpful. What tactics can you come up with to beat her? Okay, join us again next week. So, really interesting. The main thing that I'm taking away from this is that I'm glad it's a mid to late game enemy. That's going to give us time to level up the resolve on some of our brothers and get some of the weapon and role specific, well, roles going. I note that it says, here we go, so found in the company of creatures that serve her. So creatures that would suggest to be, I would think wolves, maybe some nachtsers, maybe some zombies. She's frail, so won't have a lot of hit points. I mean, in the late game, once you have good archers, I think archers will be my preferred way of dealing with these. Treat them pretty much just as a necromancer. Move your front lines forward a line or two, and then have your archers just pelt her with arrows until the dumb bitch dies. So, then the mind control thing. I mean, yes, nets are going to be good. Let's assume she mind controls one of my guys. I think the best way then to deal with that guy is to net him and move away from him, but then that seems to, like, that's going to use a lot of AP, especially because I tend to use tight formations. Like, let's say it's a guy in the center of the formation. This guy gets hexed, and I've got guys all next to him. If I want to net him, that's 4 AP, and then everybody next to him has to move away, which uses 2 more AP. And even then, he can still break out of it and move into contact, so we've still got a problem the next turn. I think it's going to be a better tactic to have a mace specialist with quick hands that has a wooden stick in his inventory. So let's say this guy gets mind controlled, my mace guy's here. Quick hands the wooden stick and just bosh him on the head and keep him stun locked until we can deal with this bitch. But man, it's like there's multiples of them in a single pod, which is quite scary. So here's my main concerns with this Hex thing. My main concern is that her Hex spell, the mind control spell, isn't going to have a cooldown. So even if you're able to sprint someone into melee contact with her to try to kill her, you would need adrenaline, and you would need fatigue to be able to attack on the next turn, even if you can get free. So most likely, let's imagine she starts, like 2 of them start, 12 of our brothers, 2 of these things, and 10 wolves. The wolves come straight into melee contact. It'll take us 2 or 3 rounds to kill all the wolves. That's going to be super fucking hard. I mean, in that such scenario, even if your guys on the flanks have footwork to get away from the wolves, and they can sprint and use adrenaline and get in contact, she'll still be able to attack before. Ugh, that'd be really hard. I feel like archery is going to be our best bet. A mix of archery and then wooden sticks just to keep our own guys under control. I mean, it's interesting how it says, like, you can taunt her, then she can't cast anything. That's cool, because she does nothing. But I mean, if I'm running into contact with the chick, this Hex woman, like I said, I mean, if you get next to her without enough AP to be able to use taunt, it's not going to help. I think what I want to test is, I want to test what the effective range of taunt is. Because if, for example, you can use it from 2 squares away, you can taunt her, then she moves forward to try to kill you, then that's going to be really good. The thing is, I've never really had brothers that have a leveling strategy that includes taunt. So that's certainly going to justify trying to experiment with new hero types, new builds, if you will. For those of you who are familiar with my playstyle, you would know that I like to go with 7 up front, 5 at the back. The 5 at the back are usually 2 to 4 archers plus a banner lord, a bannerman. You can tell I've got mountain blade on the mind, banner lord. Wish. Anyway, what was I saying? 7 up front, 5 at the back. 2 to 4 archers, depending on what I'm facing. I think if it's these bitches, I'll go with the full archers. 4 archers, and then 7 up front, who are typically 2 mace users, and then 4 2-handed weapon users. So it's going to be worth checking who I can put taunt on. I think maybe my mace users, but I don't think so. I mean, if I have 2 mace specialists, she hexes one, God forbid hexes the other one, then I've got no one to stun lock those guys. It's going to need a lot of testing. But I think broadly speaking, the way I'm going to approach it at first is I'm going to treat them basically as necromancers. The battle starts, depending on what comes supporting her. If it's wolves, we won't be able to move forward. My archers would then have to move around and try to get them in range. It's going to be tricky. It's going to be very tricky. These look like super, super scary enemies. I mean, can you imagine if you start getting combined pods where you have necromancers and Hex? Scary shit. Shit. Okay. Next dev blog. The Unhold. Last week, we took a look at the Hexe, a wily witch that is making its way into the world of Battle Brothers as part of the upcoming Beasts and Exploration DLC. This week, we'll take a look at the Unhold, a more down-to-earth type of enemy that is intended to spice up the mid-game with its physical presence. Let's go. So, the Unhold is a lumbering giant, easily the size of 3 men, and dwarfing even the tallest orc. It eats whole sheep for a snack and empties a pond to wash it down. Amazing. There's tales of enraged Unholds leveling remote farms and plucking the limbs off of unlucky farmers like wings from insects. but closer examination will reveal that Unholds aren't malicious creatures. They are fiercely territorial, but may often be content to persuade with ear-deafening bellowing and threatening gestures any invaders to run for their lives. The Unhold is a somewhat solitary creature and can be found either alone or in small groups only. The upcoming DLC will assign to all the beasts distinct habitats around the world, but the Unhold actually has several, because it comes in 3 regional variants. The most common variant is found in the northern tundra and hills. Another variant is said to be found in swamps and sometimes forests, while they inhabit caves, where they inhabit caves. The fiercest is the northern variant found in the snowy wastes, with white fur that protects equally against cold and steel. Here, for a wallpaper of the artwork, very cool. I think I know what my season 19 or whatever season it is when this DLC is out. This is obviously the thumbnail for the YouTube playthrough. The Unhold's theme in the game is displacement, and all of his skills center around it. To this behemoth, zone of control means little, as he will constantly shuffle the battlefield and demand smart repositioning by the player to protect their weakest characters, and allow the strongest to bring their weapons to bear on the beast. Unholds have little to no armor depending on the regional variant, but they possess the unique ability of healing wounds slowly over the course of combat. Luckily, they can't heal injuries like a broken leg. Same way, but the longer combat drags on, the more their regenerative abilities will work in their favor. The Unhold's first skill is called Unstoppable Charge and works similar to the charge that orcs employ. When charging, the Unhold hurls itself towards his opponents with such force that it can't be defended against with the spear wall. Well, there goes that idea. It stuns or knocks back several people at once, and it also dazes the Unhold himself as he makes impact, so he isn't able to charge and attack in the same turn. Okay, so that's at least something. The second skill is Fling Back, and allows the Unhold to grab any opponent in his way and fling them back over his shoulder like a plaything, taking their place in the process. Using the Indomitable perk will guard against it, but anyone flung like this will receive falling damage. By tossing his opponents around, the Unhold can slowly make his way wherever he wants to go. These seem like such cool enemies to fight. Once in melee, the Unhold uses his massive fists to make sweeping strikes that can hit up to 3 targets at once. With so much force, there's a chance they'll be knocked back. Because the Unhold will constantly knock targets away from himself, he's rather bad at focusing down a single target, but he excels at battering down a group of people over time. Individual attacks of the Unhold aren't the most damaging, especially to armor, but he has the potential to make a real mess out of your plans if you don't adapt fast enough. This is already my favorite of the enemies, and this is going to come back to haunt me, but it doesn't seem that scary. Primarily because what encourages me is the fact that they're territorial, so we should be able to choose when and where we fight them. Like, they shouldn't chase after us. So as long as we're smart. And I'm kind of going to think of these guys like orc warriors. Like, I would never take on orc warriors unless my archers have footwork, because the danger for this guy is to get in, melee range and start beating up your archers. As long as the archers can keep using footwork and peppering them with arrows, everybody else just beat them down. We're all going to have big armor, so I'm not too worried about these. Also, the fact that there's going to be at most just a group of them. Like, they're not going to be accompanied by other enemies. Because if they keep displacing you and put you into a formation of, for example, Nachtseers or something, and you're totally surrounded by Nachtseers, that would be terrifying. No spear wall. Doesn't affect me too much. I haven't been too big on spear walls. I mean, right before I read that, I was thinking, okay, spear wall, but then I would want to test how the AI is coded to see whether, if you put the spear wall down, it'll just stand there and wait for you to exhaust, like some of the enemies do. Seems really cool. I'm looking forward to this. I'm also quite looking forward to the missions you're going to get, like, hey, go hunt down some of these Unhold and get a reward. And I can't wait to see how this combines with crafting, like turning their hide into armor and stuff. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. The Hexe and the Unhold are the first two. Okay, I'm going to take a little break because my voice is straining a little bit. When we come back in the next episode, we're going to go through the weapons. And depending on how long that takes, we might look at the next one as well, which is the web-necked spider. Thanks for watching, friends. Please feel free to leave comments letting me know what you guys think and what you think of my silly theory crafting. If you agree, if you disagree, just let me know. Yeah, I can't wait. And I do think there will be a new Battle Brothers campaign coming soon. I don't want to totally stop playing and wait for the DLC to come out. I love the game too much. I want to get playing again. I also want to start experimenting with a build that incorporates taunt and adrenaline. So yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for watching, friends. I'm Stobbie149. This is the review of the DLC. When we come back, we'll be looking at the weapons.